So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome today to our Data Amplified event focused this week on sustainability disclosure of all kinds from right around the world. We are going to get started with a presentation that is setting the stage from me in just a moment, but we'll just give people 60 seconds to join the stream. My name's John Turner. I'm the CEO of XBRL International, and we are very pleased to present a diverse and, I trust, extremely interesting set of speakers for you today. The process of putting on an event of this nature is never a simple one, and I particularly would like to extend our thanks to our sponsors. This event has been sponsored by both AICPA and Amana. That helps us defray the costs associated with running an event of this nature and providing you, hopefully, a set of new insights. So we are just about good to go, I understand. I'm going to share my screen and we will dive into today's topic. So I believe that everybody can see that screen now, and we will get going. Today we are talking about sustainability information. For those of you that are regular users of the XBRL International newsletter, you will know that for a number of years now we have been focused on the fact that digital disclosure of sustainability information is on the way. This is something that many people and many commentators have been talking about for a long time. Many policy makers have been considering in most parts of the world for some time. But this entire world of sustainability disclosure is happening at a very rapid pace now. And that providing you some insights into all of that is what today's sessions are all about. The big shift is that we are moving from an environment in which sustainability and ESG disclosures in different parts of the world are shifting from being a voluntary framework using a host of background standards to mandatory disclosures that are typically going to be governed by securities regulators. These are something that companies will need to take extremely seriously and will create something of a seismic shift for corporates as they shift into a new era where corporate disclosure won't just be financial information, but also covers a range of sustainability measures. We're going to cover what that information is, the differences, subtle and not so subtle, that are emerging around the world, and what we can all do about that in our different capacities today. We are certainly moving from an era in which we have an alphabet soup of voluntary standards to a much clearer bouillon or clear stock, a much simpler soup. But it would be hard to argue that we've reached nirvana at this point. There is still quite a lot to do for everybody involved in this process. So let's cover in at a very high level what these changes are. Today we're really exploring what turned out to be the largest changes in corporate reporting for 90 years, and we are going to hear about these very rapid developments in sustainability reporting that are happening around the world. Many of you will have heard this mantra of digital first from many of the standard setters and regulators involved in this process. We're going to explore what that means and why there will be more and more XBRL and inline XBRL coming to you soon. And we're also going to cover aspects of the way that investors and other users are going to be using that information. And of course, we're also concerned with what level of technical coordination can happen in these different sustainability disclosure frameworks to ensure that this information is as easy as possible to produce for issuers and companies that are obliged to do so, and for users. So I guess in a nutshell, if you want to think about what today is about, and we have a pretty diverse set of attendees today from all kinds of backgrounds. It's one of the strengths of our global community. But if you are a regulator or a government agency, then this is very much about linking your sustainability disclosure plans and your digitization plans. For accounting and audit professionals, we are very keen that our colleagues in that world are understanding not just what is happening with sustainability disclosures and what that might mean, including in terms of assurance, but what it means from a digital perspective and the new capabilities that provides you, new tools in your toolkit to both expand what you can do analytically and develop the skills to be able to do so. Clearly, there are plenty of vendors and software professionals at our meetings, and hopefully today's presentations will provide you further and deeper understanding about all of these changes that are happening around the world to help you better serve your clients as you develop your own products and services in this field. For issuers and companies, we know that this is to a certain extent a very rapid change and something of a confusing landscape. We hope that this conference can help you slot in some pieces of the jigsaw puzzle and understand the digital component of this process. And of course, for data providers and analysts, you are the major beneficiaries of much of this work, and it's very important that people understand what is happening from a mandatory sustainability disclosure perspective, what that means from a digital perspective, and the ways that you can use that information. So to set the scene, many of you are familiar with some of the voluntary frameworks that have developed over the last 20 years. Many companies, some 30,000 or so companies, including arguably the largest emitters in the world of CO2, have been working towards a number of different sustainability or ESG disclosure frameworks and standards. That has provided a real strength in that it's provided lots of people with experience in this field, but it's very important to emphasize that this has been a voluntary process. It's been very much a communications process for many companies. And of course, because not all companies, even in the same country, are necessarily using the same framework or the same rules in these voluntary environments, it's very difficult to compare this information. That has caused difficulties for those that are wanting to use that information. It's also led to a wide range of workarounds in this area, with people moving from an ability to pull data directly from what a company might disclose. They're needing to use some proxies. So a range of data providers, ESG, ratings agencies, and others have been using a number of survey-based voluntary frameworks, which provides information of different qualities and using different definitions. So we call that the alphabet soup. It has been very much part of the landscape for some time, but over the last couple of years, there's been a massive pressure to change that, and indeed, we'll see how that is changing today. As people are probably aware, just by opening your local newsletter, your local newspaper, you'll be aware that regulators and governments and companies, not to mention financial institutions, are concerned about the level of so-called greenwashing that has been occurring in some of these disclosures. There are a number of high-profile cases in this area now, with prosecutions in, I think, most continents that crop up pretty much every week. This is perhaps a natural side effect of voluntary disclosures in which organizations are trying to provide a picture, indeed a positive picture, about their activities in terms of the climate and their societies, and that information isn't always up to the level that you might find in equivalent financial disclosures in terms of the rigor with which it's been prepared, the care with which that messaging is provided, and people ensuring that there is not any issues to do with deliberate or not so deliberate confusion in that area. I think another thing that has really driven a lot of this has been the discrepancies and the differences that are obvious and clear when you look at ESG ratings for the same companies. There's a lot of academic work that's happened in this area, a lot of government studies has happened in this area, and there's a shift by IOSCO and numerous regulators around the world to start to try to ensure that ratings, whilst not needing to be identical, it's desirable that the ratings are not black boxes and that it is possible to understand how different ratings have been prepared. So there are methodological reasons why ratings are different, but there's also raw data problems, and to a large extent, that's a side effect, if you like, of the different data sources and the different quality and reliability, not to mention comparability of the information that has been provided to a wide range of users. If you really click back and you wonder about the purpose and the utility of sustainability information, and sustainability covers an awful lot. We're going to have a lot of focus today on climate, but it also covers a number of other fields, and not least some of the impacts on organizations. You can look to a wide range of academic work that provides a pretty clear picture of the fact that in valuing companies, in valuing organizations, the olden days are well past us. So back in the olden days, and indeed we have to go back 50 or 60 years now, there was a very tight connection between the book value of a company and its market value. The assets of the organization were very much on the balance sheet. That has changed over the past few decades, and this graphic shows it rather clearly. And indeed, do have a read of this very readable academic paper about these changes. But investors and other users of corporate information are increasingly interested not just in earnings and on balance sheet assets, but they're interested in a range of other fields. So they're interested in intangible assets. They're interested in relative market position and business models of organizations. And they're very much interested in vulnerability to external shocks to understand the relative strength into the future, the sustainability of an organization into the future as the economic environment changes and the physical environment changes for different organizations. There is, of course, one key external shock that many investors and many governments, not to mention most citizens, are focused on today. So that's global climate change. Investors have a particular interest in the financial risks and opportunities that climate change brings about, but policymakers inside government are looking to almost every aspect of economic production to identify what levers can be used to alter the level of greenhouse gas emissions. And disclosure is one of the levers, and we're going to explore some of that today. 12 months ago, we were discussing aspects of sustainability disclosure, but the picture was not all that clear at that point. It is much, much clearer now. So we know that the alphabet soup is going away. We now have an International Sustainability Standards Board. It's a sister body to the International Accounting Standards Board, and it lives under the IFRS Foundation. We also have some draft standards from that new organization, the new ISSB. We also have, in parallel, a draft set of ESG disclosure standards from EFRAG, which is the European Financial Reporting Advisory Group, but with a new hat and a new set of responsibilities to develop standards in this space. And we also have a draft set of rules from the US SEC. So it's not as though we have a single set of rules and a single standard to rule them all, if you like. Our clear broth on the right-hand side turns out has got a number of ingredients. So we have at least ISSB, EFRAG, and SEC ingredients at the moment, and trying to work out and unpick all of that is a task for many people, not least companies that are going to need to disclose in multiple jurisdictions. So the ISSB, the International Sustainability Standards Board, is a year old now, just over a year old, and the board has been set up and it is working on its initial standards. Earlier this year, they released some preliminary standards. There was an extensive consultation process around those preliminary standards, which happened concurrently with the finalization of the board composition. But that work continues, and there was an extraordinary quantity of consultation that came into the ISSB, and the ISSB is now looking at what it wants to do in terms of finalising those standards. We expect to hear that in the new year. Concurrently, there has been some work, thank you to the IFRS Foundation, on a draft ISSB taxonomy, and indeed there was a consultation on various aspects of that, some of which many of you will have provided input on. So today we'll be hearing from ISSB board member and former board member of XBRL International, Leng Bing. In addition, just 3 weeks ago now, the EFRAG Sustainability Reporting Board, the ESRB, released its first set of official draft European sustainability reporting standards and provided those to the European Commission. There is now a consultation process on those, and we will hear later on today about some of the timelines in that field. Europe has a broad set of policy goals in this area around its Green Deal, and we will hear about that from Henrik Sanden in our second set of discussions today. And a taxonomy team has just been contracted by the EFRAG group to develop the taxonomy, the XBRL taxonomy, that will encapsulate the ESRSs. And then many of you will be aware that in addition to both the ISSB and the EFRAG framework, there is also a set of climate disclosure rules that have been proposed earlier this year by the US Securities and Exchange Commission. It's a very comprehensive set of proposals, but it is not yet clear what the final rule would look like. Again, this was a set of rules that were consulted on during the course of this year. Very extensive responses to that consultation, I think record responses to that consultation. And there are a number of nuances, not least political questions around whether the SEC, well, political and legal questions, I should say, around whether the SEC has all the powers to impose rules in this area or not. So we will hear more about that from Emily Pierce from Persephone about their work that has been going on in that area in our third presentation this morning. We can, of course, be confident, given all the changes that have been happening over the last 12 months, that these disclosures in the United States will also be in inline XBRL. So what does a digital disclosure of an ESG report mean? Many of you will have seen this, and these links are available both from the slide deck, which will be distributed to attendees, and off the XBRL International website. But there are already some examples of inline XBRL sustainability disclosures. This is a UK company from Aviva, one of the UK insurance firms, that was prepared and filed to their national storage mechanism earlier this year. That was a voluntary disclosure. The exact mechanisms for that framework is still on the way. But more to the point, when you have this sustainability information, you can do an awful lot analytically. That is becoming very apparent, and just a couple of weeks ago, we did some work with our colleagues in India to provide some analytics of the early. These are still voluntary. Next year, it will be mandatory for about 5,000 Indian companies to provide a host of sustainability information in XBRL format. We've taken the early set of data. There's 174 companies available now, and that information is highly amenable to analytics. And of course, it is now possible to go directly from the company's message, or what the company has disclosed, and pull that into analytics drive that back in terms of traceability. We're going to hear more about that from Christine Tan later on in terms of what investors are going to use all of this new information for. All of that said, there are some clear issues to do with alignment and comparability, not to mention respondent burden or provider burden. So there is lots of work to be done still in terms of aligning some of these definitions. In some cases, the definitions are identical, and we can see that in the new draft of the ESRS, the European framework, there's a lot of very positive work that's gone on in terms of alignment in that field. This is a strong push from IOSCO and a range of other key stakeholders from around the world. But we've also been concerned about what all of this means from a digital perspective. So today we're going to round out our presentations with a chat with some members of our special interest group in this field. This has been an unusual group for XBRL International, working directly with standard setters to try to help with some of the questions and some of the challenges that sustainability disclosure throws up in a digital world, and trying to ensure that the answers to those challenges are made in a consistent manner as much as possible. So more about that later today. Of course, there's really only one final point that I wanted to make in this opening salvo for today's session, and that is that we certainly can expect that all of the sustainability reporting to continue and into the long term. It's not going to go away. This is not some sort of fashion. We do know that this is an area that is rapidly changing. In fact, those of us that have been involved in other kinds of reporting for a long time, it's sort of breathtaking how quickly the changes in this area are happening. But we can be confident that there will be changes because this is all new. So the only thing we know about is that the requirements are likely to change. One of the reasons for that will be the ongoing effects of climate change. Climate change doesn't really care about social constructs or rules like reporting. It only cares about physics. If you've not seen this very useful NATO graphic that demonstrates the funnel of climate change, then do have a look again. That's from on these slides. But we can expect that this use of disclosure to provide a feedback loop to companies and to change certain behaviours is likely to be here to stay and indeed spread right around the world. So disclosure is not a silver bullet, but it does have a capacity to alter behaviours on a global scale. So it seems a more than reasonable bet to expect that investors want more and more of that information, as do many other stakeholders. And the disclosure framework provides strong incentives to both change behaviours and report very accurately. So high quality, audited and digital accessible ESG information is going to be a very significant part of reporting going forward. And that will change the everyday work of many people on this call. For companies in particular, I think it's fair to say that this represents seismic change. This means new obligations, new processes, new systems, new policies, new procedures, and new controls, because in many cases, this information is going to require external assurance. So that is something, those are all things and all themes that we're going to explore today. I hope you will enjoy today's session and that you find this event useful. Please do provide feedback in our feedback forms in due course. There might be a minute or so for questions if there are any at this point, but otherwise we will take a short pause and come back in just a moment with Bing from the ISSB. I'm not seeing any changes just yet, so that being the case, we will come out of this presentation and we will rejoin in just 5 minutes to start the main part of our event with an interview with Leng Bing. Thank you very much, everybody.